Thank you so much for a kind presentation, for a kind introduction. My presentation will be relying very much on the PowerPoint, so actually I have to find, this is the beginning. So I would like to start by the very simple statement that the famine was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, historical disaster in Ukrainian history. But to understand it properly, one cannot confine it to the realms of the national history only because it's very much global phenomenon, so therefore we have to draw very much global consequences. So just to give you probably some kind of arguments along this line, I would like to refer to a few very important books. In my understanding, probably the most persuasive explanation why famine had happened and why it had specifically Ukrainian national dimension is the book written by the famous author Timothy Snyder. But it's not the Bloodlands, it's his biography of Joseph of Yuzewski, the Polish artist coming from Kyiv, happened to be a good friend of Pilsudski, and who just also happened to be a resident of the Polish spy network over the Soviet Ukraine. What comes from this history that famine was a result as a kind of political personal rival between Stalin and Polish interwar leader for control over Ukraine, because for each of them, control over Ukraine was a kind of indispensable for the preservation of their regime in this region. In a sense, it was the fight for the future of communism, but in larger context, it was a fight for the future of the world. It's not exaggeration, because there is a new book just appeared a few months ago, a book written by Dominique Levin, probably a leading British specialist on the Russian history. He wrote a book on the Ukrainian history, on the First World War and Russia, which has a first sentence that basically the First World War was about Ukraine. Interestingly enough, he wrote this book long before the Ukrainian crisis started. But basically he saw something that not many people are aware of, to what extent Ukraine was going in Ukraine in this period of time was important for the outcome of the global conflict. And again, new book of Timothy Snyder, Black Earth, which you probably already read, in which this book, Snyder connects emergence of the Holocaust directly to the developments in Ukraine during the summer '41. What I'm trying to say here, that here we have some kind of coincidence, it's probably more than coincidence, that three authors independently, long before the Ukrainian crisis, stated something important, that Ukraine was at the core of the global politics from the 1914 to 1941, including the famine. And probably just to conclude, to top it all, there is a book by the Andrea Graziosi, famous Italian historian, who, to my explanation, provided the best interpretation why famine was genocide, and to what extent it could be compared to other genocide, including Holocaust. But what is important in this book, that in many sense, Graziosi sees genocide, famine, as a part of a broader picture, together with the Holocaust, deportation of Crimean Tatars, as one of destruction of traditional society in Eastern Europe by the extreme modernizing project, like a communism and Nazism. For these projects, such a culture of this traditional society, of Ukrainian village, of Jewish shtetls, of Crimean Tatar settlements, they were disposable. They should get rid of it, to succeed with the historical project. We are not here to discuss academic values of these books. I just want to make sure that we be aware that there is a new tendency, if you wish, or a new school, academic school nowadays, historiography, which puts Ukraine in the focus on the global studies, specifically on the developments that occurred in the global war from the 1914 till 1941. But I'm here not to discuss the academic values, as I said, I just want to show you some, I would rather show you some recent data, demographic data, and also the social survey data, to reveal to what extent this kind of the disaster had a possible effect on Ukrainian society, which is still felt even today, long ago after these tragic occurrences had happened. So this is the first scheme. This is the scheme or graphic which has been based on the studies, joint studies of Russian and Ukrainian demographers. Again, long before the Ukrainian crisis in 2008. This is their calculation on the life expectancy in Ukraine throughout the whole 20th century in the broader comparative picture in comparison with the life expectancy in Western Europe. So you have a Ukrainian expectancy for males marked by green color and European by orange color. So we may see already this kind of tragic character of Ukrainian history throughout the 20th century, that each single year, probably with one exception of 60s, each single year the life expectancy in Ukraine is much shorter than on average European. But I would love to draw your attention to two lowest points on this scheme. The one is 1942, which is, I don't really see the picture here, but must be something around probably 15 or somewhere else. I don't see it, but you could easily check. I don't believe the exact numbers matters here, the story which matters here. So this is one of the lowest points, 1942. Tragic as it is, it's still something which could really be expected, because it was the war. It was the war, Ukraine had just survived the battles of the Soviet-Nazi war. This was the first year, beginning of the second year of the Nazi occupation. This is the Holocaust, which already started this year. Also with some kind of clashes within the society. Also with another starvation, which was forced by the Germans over the large Ukrainian cities in the east. The story which is not quite often mentioned, so to say. So basically, this is the war. It's tragic. So you may expect this low expectancy for males. But again, you may see the difference between Ukraine and the rest of the Europe. To what extent Europe could live, so to say, better, much better, even in the midst of the war, comparing to what was going in Ukraine. So you see Ukraine is the core. Ukraine is at the core of the violence, so to say. But this is not the main story. The main story here is this: that the lowest point is not 1942. The lowest point is made by 1933. This is the lowest point, the shortest life expectancy the Ukraine ever experienced in the 20th century. And here is a kind of bitter irony, because 1933 there has been no war. It was formally peaceful years. It was exactly the famine, the Holodomor. So here is the irony, which has been marked by several Russian and Ukrainian historians. So in a sense, what Soviet citizens experienced in formally peaceful year was much more tragic than most of West Europeans experienced even during the war. So this is give you the sense of the history of this region. Also explain why we could not understand each other, people who coming from the West and from the Eastern region, because Europe, because we presume we have a common history. We do have. This is a common history. But this is hosted the history that quite often develop two quite different tracks, as you could see it from this data. So a Russian demographer, former dissident who migrated to the United States, Maksudov, made a general evaluation according to which in territory of Ukraine, starting from 1914 until the 1945, every second male and every fourth female died of an unnatural violent death, which could give you the idea about the scale of the demographical calamities which occurred in this part of the world. Most probably, this data or this analysis done by Maksudov is exaggeration, but still it largely confirms this conclusion that Ukraine, at the beginning of the first half of the 20th century, was probably the most dangerous place to live in the world. So to understand it further, or to make it picture clearer, we have to say that Holodomor and Holocaust was not the only genocide in Ukrainian history in that period. For sure, already there has been tragic events on the large scale, but there were also several waves of the genocide that swept over Ukrainian history in a very short time span of 15 years, starting from the famine, then with the destruction and annihilation of the Soviet war by Nazis, then of course Holocaust, and plus destruction of Roma, which is also very similar to Holocaust, destruction of Jews. Then we have an ethnic cleansing in Berlin in 1943, mutual Polish-Ukrainian cleansing, which has very much genocidal character. The deportation of Crimean Tatars in 1944, and finally, the deportation of the Ukrainians from the Polish territory, so-called Akcja Vistula, in 1947. So this you have in a very short span of 15 years, you have a sixth wave of the genocide, of which Holodomor and Holocaust are the largest, but unfortunately not the only one. So this will give you a dramatic character of Ukrainian history. Ukraine has been in the core of what Timothy Snyder described as a bloodlands. But even being is the core, it was even more bloodlandish in the other territory. Because, yeah, probably you can compare this kind of scale demographic disaster to what happened in Belarus. But still, Belarus didn't have a famine. Belarus has no deportation of Crimean Tatars. So actually what I'm saying here, that in a many sense, Ukrainian history is very much distinctive because of geopolitical crucial character of Ukraine, because if some great power was fighting over their control of the Eastern Europe, Ukraine turned out to be on the crucial position, unfortunately, and also because of this kind of modernist project, extremism, Nazism, and communism, plus the ethnic diversity and religious diversity, which also made kind of very explosive, to say this region made this region of very explosive characters. To show you the long-term results of this specific character of Ukrainian history, genocidal character, if I may say so, I would like to turn attention to another survey. This is a world value survey, which measures, so to say, the progress of a variety of different nations and people in the demonization project, so to say, and basically focus on values. So what I try to attend your attention to the fact that Ukraine is, probably you may find it, is on the top left corner of this map. Ukraine has one of the highest level of survival values, which affects the kind of the result of having this kind of history. Because once you have this kind of history, this past, it's very natural for the population to survive, to keep their profile low in order to survive, so to say. Or they will quite often say this specific kind of schizophrenia, which is very much dominant in Russian, Belarusian, Ukrainian society, which people could state two mutually exclusive statements at the same time without seeing any kind of difference. Like they would vote for the independence of Ukraine, but still feel very strong nostalgia for the Soviet Union. And this is something which is described as a social schizophrenia, and many social psychologists say this is a result of the deep trauma, which is basically very demographic trauma. And so what I'm saying here, this probably shows you, in a way, that this long shadow of famine, also including other genocides, but the famine as the main symbol of Ukrainian calamities, show you to what extent history still matters. Unfortunately, still matters. Because history serves as an impediment to radical reforms, political, economic. Because once you have a society which still stuck in survival values, you could really embark on the radical reforms. Luckily enough, what happened in 0 years, we have a huge shift in these values, emerges of a large segment of population who prefer self-expression rather than survival values. And you could see from this comparison, this is the beginning of the 0 years and this is the end of the 0 years. So to say, before Orange Revolution, and after Orange Revolution. And you could see there's kind of real shift in terms of Ukraine. And we don't really see the shift in case of Russia. And I believe to a large extent it explains the fact of the first and second Maidan, because what you have there, you have emergence of a new generation. We call it Pearson independence. Mostly young people who now in the age, say, 25, 20-some years, has been born by the end of the communism. They don't remember communism, or they don't remember very vaguely. So they actually, formative years coincided with the post-communist communist period. They were very educated. You probably know that Ukraine now belongs to the top 10 country in the world, according to the rate of the young people who, after graduation from high schools, enter the universities. The percentage is approximately 80%. And also it's a very global generation due to digitalization, so to say, to be the part of the network. This is a very interesting map. This is a map made by the end of January 1914, already amidst the violent phase of Euromaidan clashes. And this is a map which presents pro-Maidan and anti-Maidan networks on Facebook and also in Russian equivalent Kontakte. So the red dots and darker the red dots, it's Maidan communities, networks, and the green, dark blue dots, it's anti-Maidan communities. So what you see here, that the exception of Crimea and Donbass, whole Ukraine, without convenient religious difference, networks are very pro-Maidan. And providing the fact that most of the users of the internet and networks, there's a young people of the middle class, you could easily see this kind of effect. Emerges a new generation which has a quite different set of values. And to a large extent, my claim is that this was their revolution. I believe there's some kind of differences between the Maidan of 2004 and the recent Maidan. For sure, they're very similar. They were in many ways. But there's one crucial difference that in this last Maidan, we have a people of the young age, which on the previous Maidan was still teenagers or even kids. And this is their behavior to the large extent define the character of this Maidan. So my point, I would develop this point because I made it several times, and I know there's also some other historians made this point. It makes no sense to compare this Maidan, the last Maidan, not with the previous Maidan, but this moment like the Occupy Wall Street, like a protest on Taksim Square in Istanbul, like protest on Bolotnaya Square in Moscow, as a kind of new global phenomenon emerging of this new middle class young generation. And coming to memory of Holodomor, how it affects Ukraine, so to say. So, to make the long story short, for the first 10 decades of independence, there has been not that much talks about the Holodomor. There was attempts to continue this politics of the Soviet Union to marginalize these memories, which is a story which has not been discussed here, but still you have to take it by the face value. The real instrumentalization of the famine started with Yushchenko, with the victory over the revolution. Basically, Yushchenko rule was a failure, was a great failure, was a dramatic failure. But on the backdrop of this failure, his politics of the famine, of the Golden seems to be the only success, and large success. And just to, because since his coming to power, the issue of Holodomor has been largely discussed. More so, you have an increasing number of people in Ukraine, and I'll finish with this part, which believe that famine was a genocide, and there's no big difference between different regions in Ukraine. But why is that? Why is why this implementation of the instrumentalization of famine was so successful? I believe probably the best explanation was provided by the former counselor advisor to Gorbachev. His name is Alexandr Tsipko. For many analysts who didn't visit history, this name is very familiar. He himself has been born in Odessa in this region, which was also plagued by the famine. He remembers the memories about the famine. He's not, he's not promoter of Ukrainian independence. You may easily surmise. He's very much, say, pro-Russian, and he really feels nostalgia for some kind of larger Russian-Ukrainian community. In 2008, in the midst of the Yushchenko politics of memory, he writes a huge article in leading Russian newspaper is Novaya Gazeta. It's called Stalin, Holodomor, Druzhba Nolotov. Stalin, famine, and friendship of people. Basically, this article has been kind of suggestion what Kremlin should do if they won't keep Ukraine within its realm, so to say. So basically, his point was that Kremlin is very wrong thinking that impact of Ukrainian nationalism is limited only to the western part of Ukraine, former Polish inhabited part. He believes it's a basic mistake, because he believes that what happens there in Ukraine, that Ukrainian nationalism has a very strong support, potential support, in eastern, central, and south of Ukraine, because he says there are many people who still remember famine there. Famine there, even so, has been eliminated and forbidden, has been part of their family stories. Therefore, he says that Yushchenko is bound to be successful, because he used this personal story, so say, and this personal story resonates with his politics. And you have a cumulative effect when you have emergence of new identity, or new myth, if you wish, of the famine as a kind of uniting symbol of new Ukrainian identity. Therefore, Tsipko concludes, if Putin wants to keep Ukraine within its real control, has to do likewise, has to accept existence of the Russian famine, 2023, accept as a kind of the new Russian symbol, and more importantly, to condemn Stalin as a perpetrator of the famine, and thus keep Ukraine and Russia together. So basically, it's what never exactly happened, because if Putin would not be Putin, he would condemn Stalin, because of the love repercussion. What I'm saying here, it largely explains this effect of emergence new identity in Ukraine based on Holocaust, which is very much related to this new generation. And just to conclude, you just see this kind of the picture. This is the new survey dated 2 weeks ago. You see the support over Ukraine for the statement that Ukraine was a genocide. So it now has been, you see there's that there are some regional differences, but they are not, to say, relevant that much, because everywhere it's a majority. It's majority over 2/3. In national terms, nowadays, 80% of the people believe that Holodomor was a genocide, comparing to 40-some 10 years ago. So this is a huge, really kind of huge change. And more specifically, you see this kind of the scheme for the last 5 years, this kind of line, green line, which is going up. You can see kind of changes. But most importantly, unfortunately, Cyrillic, I have to explain this, it really shows that the largest support for this phenomenon, for his memory, comes from the younger generation, from middle class. So what I'm saying here, you have a kind of new kind of context which explains a lot this emergence new identity, post-Maidan identity, but in the same time it's identity which is very much made or based on acceptance of the, I believe there is some kind of the deep undercurrent symbolism of this conference that is held. It is held in Holland. It is organized or generously welcomed by the Hague Institute of Global Justice, and has been co-organized by Ukrainian society, majority of which, as you may easily see, are younger generation. So this is exactly provided some kind of context within which now this myth operates. It's a myth of new Ukraine, which is very much globalized, in very much global context. Thank you so much.